Story 1. Back in 2006, some friends and I went to a matinee movie in Jacksonville, Florida. We came out into the bright afternoon sun, and there was a man yelling for help as he chased an ostrich around the parking lot. We jumped in to help him. He was trying to get the ostrich into the back of a van. We even got other people to assist. The police arrived for some reason. I guess a bunch of people chasing an ostrich in a parking lot is unusual. The man we were helping disappeared all of a sudden. At one point, a person in a cow costume joined us. Eventually, the ostrich was captured by animal control and taken away. We learned that the van belonged to another moviegoer who had no idea what was happening and had left his van unlocked. The police questioned us a bit, but we were clueless and had no answers, so we all left eventually. Where did the ostrich come from? I do not know. Why was the man trying to put it in someone's van? I do not know. Why does Tarzan not have a beard? I do not know. Story 2. Partner was driving to their parents' place from university. I told them to call me when they made it home. I never said this before and haven't since. Something felt off. I got a call at 11:30 p.m., and before I picked up, I knew something had gone wrong. This was about the right time for them to have arrived. Someone on the highway, from the back of a truck heading in the other direction with its headlights off, threw a landscaping stone through my partner's windscreen. My partner was fine, just a few cuts from the glass. That same truck threw 40 stones, hit 12 cars, and killed one person. Before running off, they circled back and took pictures of the last car where it had driven off the road. Story 3. This is frustrating, and it still bothers me. I was doing math homework in college with my calculator on my bed. My room door was closed, and none of my roommates were home. I couldn't have been doing the math without a calculator, so I know it was there. I went to use the restroom that was in my room and could see the bed from the restroom, so I know nobody came into my room. When I returned to the bed, the calculator was gone. I looked everywhere for it and couldn't find it, so I thought it might have fallen somewhere unusual, but there really wasn't anywhere for it to fall. When I was moving out, I tried to find it because it bothered me. I have obsessive-compulsive disorder and never lose anything. I never found it and have not seen it again. It was a minor issue, but it literally just vanished. Story 4. My dad was always really good at finding four-leaf clovers. He would find a couple every time he looked and give them to me as a child. I could never find them on my own. The day after he died, it was suspiciously warm. I was in the front yard and decided to look for one. Every time I bent down, I found another one. I started bagging them and had at least 20 by the time I stopped. I had never found a clover in my life before then. Now, occasionally I will look for them still and usually find one right where I look. I wish I still had that bag of clovers he left me. Story 5. Once, I found a perfectly intact large cheese puff in the middle of my living room floor. I lived alone and did not even like cheese puffs. Nobody else had keys to my place other than my landlady. Story 6. When I was a kid, my dog passed away. Naturally, I was devastated, crushed, heartbroken, and feeling all the emotions. I didn't grow up particularly religious. We said grace and nighttime prayers, but not much else. I remember praying for a sign that my dog was okay wherever he was. Moments later, I found a yellow bow in my bed. He wore bows sometimes after a grooming. He was a Shih Tzu, but he hadn't had long enough hair to wear bows in years, so it was strange to find it randomly in my bed. I took it as a sign and kept it for as long as I could remember. Story 7. I bought a flat-screen television from Micro Center about 15 years ago. We moved states and it came with us. It was in our front room. The television in our back room went out and had to be replaced. We went shopping for a new television, and I found one that matched the one in the front. I got a salesperson to grab one from the back. Here's the strange part. Once they left, I felt lightheaded and had tunnel vision. I almost passed out. I leaned against a shelf and collected myself. Around that time, the salesperson came out with a different television model. I asked about it. It had the same specifications and price, and the salesperson thought it was the television I asked for. No worries, I decided to take it. When I got home and was setting it up, I realized I needed a cable from the other television to test something. I mentioned that I wasn't sure it would work because of the different brands. My wife said that the television in the front was an LG and should be fine. I argued that it was a JVC. I went to the front, and it turned out to be an LG. According to my family, it has always been an LG. Story 8. No one ever believes me, but here goes. When I was in college, I shared a room with a friend from high school. One night, I was sleeping and had a dream where we were on a huge pile of garbage, searching for something. We were both digging in the trash. Then I woke up, got up, and went to the bathroom. When I climbed back into bed, my roommate stirred and mumbled, "I found it. It's over here," before rolling over and going quiet again. The next morning, he didn't remember any of it. I didn't dream about getting out of bed, nor did I dream of his response. Story 9. Sitting in a parking lot, a lady pulled up alongside a group of seagulls. She got out of her car, grabbed a bird, put it in her car, and drove away. Whenever I approach a flock of birds, they quickly scatter. I was wondering if they knew each other. Story 10. I guess it's explainable, though why it happens is still a scientific mystery. I once saw ball lightning come out of my old black and white television, float down the hall, hover there for about a minute, and then just disappear. Story 11. This past Friday, I was shopping in my local outdoor market when I saw a man gliding down the hill. He was sitting in a beige love seat balanced on top of a skateboard, holding an orange tabby cat over his left shoulder, with a green parakeet perched on his right shoulder. He sat there looking relaxed, occasionally leaning or reaching out with his foot to adjust the skateboard. I lost sight of him as he passed a bus. Story 12. I went with an ex to visit her dad in Colombia. I was careful, but the day before we left, they wanted American food, so we went to the Hard Rock Cafe there. I'm pretty sure that's where I got sick. It hit me in the afternoon the day before we left. It started normally with just vomiting, then quickly changed to vomiting and diarrhea. The diarrhea turned into expelling a pink flaky substance that I assume was my intestinal lining. And at the end, I was releasing a clear, bubbly mucus. I had completely emptied my digestive tract. After about 15 hours of this, it finally subsided just in time for me to get on a plane. Like a zombie, I packed and rode to the airport. 2 excruciating hours later, I was on the plane. I sat down and quickly passed out. I woke to the flight attendant asking if I wanted anything. I had heard yogurt was good for your gut, so I ordered some and an orange juice because my body told me I needed it. She came back, and that first sip of orange juice was the single most pleasurable non-sexual experience of my life. I could feel the sugars and vitamins coursing through me. I finished it and stared at the yogurt for a few minutes, hesitant. I finally decided to eat it, then quickly passed out again. After an unknown amount of time, I woke up with my gut telling me I needed to get to a bathroom. Luckily, the plane's toilet was free. I hurriedly took off my pants, expecting to unleash unholy things on that poor toilet, but instead, I pushed out a surprisingly solid-feeling stool. Shocked, I leaned and looked down. The stool was pure white. That yogurt had passed through me nearly unchanged. That was the weirdest, most unexplainable experience I've ever witnessed. Story 13. Riedel wine glasses. I watched a salesman open a bottle of Kendall Jackson Chardonnay and pour equal amounts into a basic bar wine glass and a Riedel Chardonnay glass. I tasted both, and the wine was completely different from one glass to the other. It was like a magic trick. Story 14. One day I woke up and felt like everything in the world had been adjusted by 90 degrees. Even though my bed was in the same place in the house, and the house was in the same location in the neighborhood and the neighborhood in the same position in the city, I was aware that everything was at a 90-degree angle to where it should have been. That lasted about 3 days, and then I woke up and felt like everything had returned to where it was supposed to be. Story 15. I was walking late at night with my ex through our neighborhood when I was 17 or 18. We walked by a large 2-story house that had no lights on except for one in the kitchen and living room area on the bottom floor, which caught my eye because of the 6 or 7 figures I saw standing in a circle in that room through the window facing the street. They were perfectly still, all holding hands and wearing robes with headpieces. I would have thought I was seeing things if my ex hadn't been there to witness it. We got out of there quickly. Story 16. I gained a few hours one day. I live in the country and have to take my garbage to a dump. The dump is open Wednesday from 1:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I had a Wednesday off, so I decided to take the garbage that day. I took the garbage, dumped it, and chatted with the attendant. When I left, I felt very strange and lightheaded. I pulled over to the side of the road and took a deep breath. When I went to turn my car radio down or off, I noticed the time said 11 a.m. I thought that was unusual, so I looked at my phone. It also said 11 a.m. I made a U-turn and went back to the dump. I was still on the same road as the dump, just about half a mile away. The gate was closed and locked. It wasn't open yet. I went back on Saturday and chatted with the attendant about Wednesday. He said he opened at his regular time but didn't see me. I asked about our conversation, and he said he isn't doing anything DIY right now and that he didn't see me on Wednesday. Story 17. I lived a partial lifetime in a dream recently. Felt like years. I had a family, a different job, and friends. I slept, woke up, dreamed, and lived, and then I woke up years later in this world. There are no words to explain how it was. I just lived a life not in this reality. I miss home. Story 18. As a child, various relatives would take me on trips to the zoo, museums, amusement parks, movies, and more. One of these trips was when my grandfather took us to the movies. This old movie theater dated back to the days of live stage entertainment, known as vaudeville. The theater had an orchestra pit, even though it had not been used in decades, as vaudeville had long since faded away. I was following my grandfather in the area between the front row seats and the orchestra pit when, out of curiosity, I peeked into the orchestra pit. There was no floor and I could see into the basement. On the basement floor was something reminiscent of the old poem about Humpty Dumpty. The floor held a large, egg-shaped figure with a happy face painted on its shell. It had arms and legs and lay on its back, flailing as if trying to stand up but unable to do so due to its shape. I glanced at my grandfather for a moment and then looked back into the orchestra pit. This time, the painted expression on the figure's face had changed to one of grief and frustration. The eyes were closed, and the mouth was in a grimace. I looked away for a brief second and then back into the orchestra pit. This time, the egg was gone, leaving only the bare basement floor. I turned away again, just for a few seconds, perhaps to tell someone what I had seen. When I looked back, the orchestra pit floor was visible again. I could no longer see into the basement, and the pit had only a few wooden folding chairs on it. As the years passed and I began going to movies on my own, I occasionally returned to that same theater. Each time before the movie started, I would check the orchestra pit, but I never saw anything like that again. It was just the plain old bare floor, minus the wooden folding chairs. That old theater is now gone, a typical victim of the rise of home video and cable television. Story 19. Two of my family members died in a fire right before my 10th birthday in February. The following year, around the anniversary of their death, our smoke alarms kept going off for about a week. Almost all of them had been purchased the year before, as losing family members in a fire profoundly affects you. Sometimes it was the same alarms and sometimes different ones, but it continued happening even after changing the batteries and replacing a couple with new ones. Now, every February, multiple alarms still go off, and I experience panic attacks every time I hear them. Story 20. For context, we have specific family friends we are relatively close with. My family and I were going fishing. It was meant to be a trip just for us. In the car, I had a random feeling that those specific family friends would be there. I don't know why. We arrived at the site and they were, in fact, there with another family we didn't know. We spent the day together. On the way home, my sister said, "I kind of knew this would happen." So did I. We both felt that the family friends would be there for some reason, although there was no concrete evidence to support it. Everyone probably forgot by now, but it's something I still think about sometimes. Story 21. When I was about 5 years old, I was at my grandmother's house, and we were about to visit her friend who lived right behind her apartment. I was walking right behind my grandmother when I saw a huge wolf-like dog crossing our path. I immediately froze because I was incredibly fearful of dogs back then. My grandmother kept trying to tug me, but I told her there was a dog in front of us. She kept trying to convince me that there was nothing there, but I insisted that there was. Eventually, the dog passed, and I continued walking. Later that night, my grandmother got a call that her nephew had passed away. I was very close to him and was saddened by his passing. The next day, we went back to my grandmother's friend's house, and she told her about the loss. The friend mentioned that she had seen the dog hanging out on the back porch the night before, and that it was an omen. She didn't tell my grandmother because she didn't want to spook her. I'm still not sure how or why I saw the dog, but I always think about that. Story 22. I was at a man's townhouse and we started talking about his late mother, who had been very sick in the house for a long time. She still had all her medication in the basement. This was a very old Beacon Hill place. The moment we began discussing her, the television turned on. It was an old model, not digital, with no remote. We had to physically go to the television to turn it on. We were startled. Perhaps it was her spirit? Story 23. Traveling through the desert with my family as a child was a memorable experience. One night, I was looking out the window at the sky when a bright star caught my attention. I gazed at it for what felt like 30 seconds, then it zipped left, moved upward, and shot off into the distance, disappearing completely. While I'm not suggesting it was extraterrestrial, it was certainly unexplainable and strange. Story 24. One day, I was walking down the street when a car pulled up next to me, with a man driving and a woman in the passenger seat asking for directions. The curb was quite high, so I stepped down to lean into the car window. To my surprise, the woman in the passenger seat was not wearing a shirt or bra, and I found it quite distracting. I provided them with directions back to the highway, which was literally right behind them. They had to pass the signs to ask me for help, which left me feeling confused. Story 25. I do not believe in ghosts or an afterlife. I worked at a large DIY store in the southeast of England. Over about 3 years, I experienced 4 occasions when I was in the store after hours with one other person, and something happened that I cannot explain. While sitting in the office with the manager, just the 2 of us in the building, a paint shaker started working on the sales floor without any apparent reason. I came into the store for an alarm call out around 1 or 2 a.m. There were no signs of a break-in, but as per policy, I had to look around. I went out onto the sales floor while the other staff member was in the office and heard an incredible crash. When I looked, 4 or 5 digging spades had been flung across the aisle. This incident scares me the most. Even as I type this, the hairs on my arms stand up. While doing some late-night merchandising in the store with another staff member, I was kneeling down arranging stock on a base shelf. I saw the other staff member pass by the front aisle, so I shouted to ask them to grab a can of drink from the tills on their way back. However, the staff member then spoke from the other side of the aisle, where they had been the entire time. This one may sound silly, but we were selling Billy Bass singing fish, which were popular in the 1990s when they first appeared. I had placed one on the first till with the motion sensor on to attract customers during the day. During another late-night alarm call-out, I stood on the sales floor alone, several tills away from the first till, and the fish started singing. I went into the office to tell the staff member, and I heard it start singing a second time. In 35 years of working in stores, this is the only time anything like this has happened, all at the same location. Story 26. My oldest memory is attending a wedding. However, my dad claims I never went to a wedding as a toddler or child. Story 27. Driving late at night, I saw a woman standing at a bus stop a little up the road wearing what looked like a strange cricket jersey. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't what I thought. It was a random topless middle-aged woman standing by the road, which was definitely not something I expected that autumn. Neither was the steamed-up saloon car rocking back and forth in its parking spot about a mile and a half later. Story 28. When I was a kid, there was a day when I was getting a bowl of cereal ready. I opened the milk carton, and it smelled like gasoline. I went to my mom and said, "Hey, it smells like gasoline." She went and confirmed it. A few minutes later, we checked it again, and it smelled completely normal. Story 29. I knew a young child years ago who had an uncanny ability to start talking about someone, and then that person would just show up. One time, he mentioned a relative no one had heard from in years, and then they dropped by for a visit a day or two later. Another time, he accurately guessed the first name of a new teacher starting at his school before anything was said about her, and it wasn't a common name. But the weirdest instance was when he described feeling like someone really important was going to visit. The next day, his father's company's vice president dropped by to personally deliver a surprise recognition bonus, something his father was not expecting at all. This led people to speculate that the child was psychic or had some sort of prophetic gift, and I still can't explain how he got everything right every single time. Story 30. A few years ago, I was outside my building having a late-night smoke when I heard a meow. I saw the source of the sound. It was a cat under some stairs. Nothing unusual there. Then I realized what I was hearing wasn't a cat's meow, but a human voice saying the word meow. Time to go back inside now. Story 31. Nothing major, but strange all the same. My fiancé and I were on the bus in the UK about 9 years ago. The bus was pretty full, and when we got to a standard bus stop at a shopping center where the bus had to stop due to its location, it couldn't have been more than 10 seconds, but nobody got off. My partner and I looked at each other, wondering why, because the stop usually had people boarding and alighting. He asked loudly, "Is anyone getting off?" To which about 75% of the passengers looked at us and realized they needed to get off the bus. Story 32. I saw a flying saucer while walking to work around 4 a.m. It flew about 20 feet over my head, completely silent, with lights spinning around the edge. I was trying to rationalize it, wondering if it could be a giant drone. Then it suddenly darted off sideways at an incredible speed and vanished over the trees. Story 33. Visiting a friend's cousin in a trailer park in the middle of the Florida Everglades about 20 years ago. 3 bright lights appeared in the sky, spaced far enough apart to seem like separate objects. They hovered there for a while before disappearing. Story 34. I participated in a seance with Bloody Mary in New Orleans. I am a huge skeptic, but I love paranormal and unexplained phenomena, so I was very intrigued. I know enough about hot and cold readings and what to expect from a psychic to think I could easily call out any deception. It is important to note that she did not know our names in advance, as we were last-minute additions. We literally walked into the shop just as she was about to start and mentioned that she had room at the table if we wanted to join. There was no chance for her to research us beforehand. It genuinely freaked me out, and I honestly cannot come up with a scientific explanation for how she knew certain things. My mom mentioned her dad by name, and Bloody Mary immediately asked, "Which one?" "There are 2 John does here. Her brother is also deceased and has the same name." Odd but not an unreasonable guess. However, she also knew that my uncle was a drug addict, stating that she could sense it and it made her uncomfortable. She knew exactly how both of them died, knew my grandmother's name, and said she was present and quite difficult. There were many other details she revealed, but I was taken aback by how matter-of-fact she was, and that she didn't resort to generic statements like, "They love you very much and say they're watching over you." Instead, she said, "Your drug addict uncle and difficult grandmother are stressing me out. You have many other deceased relatives present, and it's just a lot." This resonated strongly with my family's dynamic. She also had a lot of information about the friend I called upon during my turn, but I could tell that discussing her was really upsetting for Bloody Mary, so I didn't press for more questions or answers. Overall, it was an incredible experience. I still cannot fully say I believe it because it seems unbelievable, but there's no way she could have guessed some of that information. I would love to participate again and have more time to discuss all of this and how it works. Story 35. I am Indian, and when I was about 1 year old, my family held a Karvadi, a Hindu ceremony where a baby's first hair is shaved. Nothing unusual so far, but here's where it gets strange. When I was around 10 years old, I had a dream in which I saw my Karvadi as if I were an outsider watching it happen. I told my mom about the dream and described everything in detail, the color of the clothes I was wearing, exactly where I was sitting, who was present, and even small details about the setup. This wasn't some grand event with a photographer, so there were no photos or videos taken. It happened over 30 years ago, and nobody had mobile phones back then. Yet I somehow saw the entire ceremony accurately, even though I was just a baby when it happened. Story 36. A friend and I went for a walk late at night. We were not deep in the woods, just around the corners between some fields and trees. Before we took a turn, we saw a big black dog walking in front of us, disappearing out of sight behind some bushes and trees. We followed the same path a minute later, but we couldn't see the dog anymore. It was not on the field to one side, and it couldn't have disappeared through the bushes because there was a small stream and a fence. The dog had matted fur. No wolves or coyotes live in this area. A few days later, I took the same route after a Halloween party on my bike. I had a light with batteries. It worked fine the entire way. As I approached the spot, my light started flickering and then went out. I was terrified and sprinted through the turn. Right after the turn, my light turned back on as if nothing had happened. These two events at the same spot, just a few days apart, made me a little suspicious. Story 37. In 2007, I witnessed an unidentified flying object in the strictest definition of that term. I had to drive back to my hometown after a full day of university classes. It was a 3.5-hour drive, and it was about midnight when this happened. I was the only one on the road, driving alone. As I began exiting the highway, I saw a single dot of white light directly ahead of me drop from the sky. I say drop, but it moved at a speed no aircraft or device at the time, since this was well before drones could achieve. It seemed to move faster than something simply falling, even at terminal velocity. Then it hovered completely still, what seemed like maybe 100 feet off the ground. I had no way to actually judge the distance, but as I reached the red light at the intersection I was to turn at, it was still directly in front of my car. Past this light, the area started to get more rural with no streetlights, so there were no real points of reference. I was flabbergasted. I reached the red light, rolled my windows down, and stuck my head out of the car. Something with that kind of speed and the ability to simply stop midair must make some noise, right? Nope. Just silence, as there were no other cars nearby or passing on the highway or roads, and the gas stations at that intersection were closed. Not a single sound. If it was a helicopter or any aircraft I am familiar with, it seemed close enough that there should have been some kind of noise. Dead silence. The light just hovered there. It didn't move at all. Not even a slight movement in any direction, which seems strange because how could it have moved that fast in a straight drop and then suddenly stopped without making any kind of small adjustments? I stared at it for about a minute, even past when my light turned green. No sound, no movement. I eventually made my turn under the highway and continued on my way. I tried to look back as I was driving away, but the object was nowhere to be seen. It wasn't a reflection, as there was nothing to make that single dot of white light reflect onto my windshield. There were no billboards, street lamps, or structures ahead where it appeared to be. It couldn't have come from my headlights because it was just a single point of pure white light, and it completed its descent before I reached the stoplight at the intersection. I have driven that particular stretch of road many times before, as that was the exit I always took to get home from work or school. I know that intersection and everything around it intimately. I have no explanation, no other witnesses. I even tried to look up unidentified flying object sightings for that date in the following days, months, and years and found nothing at all. Story 38. One morning, my grandma was cooking breakfast while wearing red plaid flannel pajamas. I saw the sleeve catch fire and travel up her arm in a ring, dissipating at her shoulder in less than a second. She never even noticed it and remained completely unharmed. Story 39. I was walking my dog about 6 years ago at night when I saw a flash and a streak of purple light in the sky. There were no other lights in the sky, and it was a clear night. Story 40. It is not something I witness, but something I experience. So far, I have known 3 times when death was approaching someone I love. I cannot explain how I know. The feeling is difficult to convey. It is a certainty so absolute that I would swear the universe turned around that moment. Story 41. I have a history of sleepwalking and talking, and I have a frequent visitor in my sleep whom we refer to as the Faceless Lady. Here are a couple of unexplainable incidents. First, my wife told me about a time when she was getting ready for work in the morning and I was sound asleep. I apparently rolled over, stared her in the eyes and said, "Good news! I have about 3 children's worth of blood." Then I stammered, rolled over, and instantly fell back asleep. I have no idea what I was talking about or why I used children as a measurement. In another instance, when we moved into our apartment, I rolled over in the middle of the night and hugged her. I felt her grab my hand and squeeze it. Then I saw my wife walk into the room. I saw her in the doorway, went to say something, and felt my hand get pulled, followed by a whisper, and then nothing. My wife asked if I was all right and said she had seen me move when I was pulled. We have no clue what that was. Just one more. There was a time when I woke up next to my wife and found myself holding a heavy glass lamp over my head, as if I was about to hit her with it. Thankfully, it was stuck because of the power cord, as I have no idea what I was doing. Sleeping can be spooky sometimes. Story 42. I was driving a car on the road, and in front of me, there was a dip in the road, similar to a roller coaster. Another car was driving in the opposite direction as I approached the dip. The other car went out of my sight while it was at the bottom of the dip. When I reached the position where I should have been able to see the car, it was nowhere to be found. There were no other roads intersecting at that point where the car disappeared. Still baffles me. Story 43. A few years ago, some of my friends lived together in a house. It was a typical bachelor pad, where 4 guys in their mid-20s resided. It was a nice house, and right across the street was a river. One side of the street had houses, and the other side had the river, which was near its mouth, where it opened into a larger body of water. It was a river where people might go fishing, but it wasn't big or deep enough for boats. In fact, motorized vehicles were not allowed on the river, and nobody would ever go swimming there because it was mostly just mud. Every year, the fire department had to rescue people who got stuck in the mud during low tide. One night, my friends threw a party with lots of drinking and music, but nothing too crazy. There were probably no more than 15 to 20 of us there. I was playing beer pong outside when we saw something come out of the river. It was around 11:30 p.m., and it was very dark. There was nobody else around, just us at the party and this figure emerging from the water. It walked right up to us, and it was an older man, probably about 50 years old. He was shorter and stocky, around 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing about 180 pounds. Not fat, not muscular, just thick. It seemed like he had a bubble of silence around him. I swear the music stopped, and everyone ceased talking as this old, wet man walked into the party. He was wearing nothing except a small Speedo. He asked what game we were playing and just stood there watching us for about 5 minutes. After that, he turned around and walked back into the river. Story 44. My friend and I were at my house. We were about 13 years old and decided to go to her house. A few hours later, my mom called her house phone and asked why my bedroom door was locked. I explained that I didn't lock it because I wasn't there, and the key was still in the door on the inside of the room. The door literally locked itself. My parents thought I was playing games because they took my key away. I never locked my door anyway, so I didn't care. To this day, I have no explanation. Story 45. I attended an aviation challenge camp during middle school and shared a small dorm room with about 6 or 7 other girls. We noticed some writing on the wall that said, "I died here. May I haunt you forever," which led us to jokingly discuss the ghost. The next morning, when we woke up, one girl had a broken nose and another girl had blood on her hands. I have no idea what happened, and I'm a light sleeper. Story 46. When I was 12, we moved into a brand new house shortly after my grandfather passed away. When we moved in, my middle brother, who was around 8 or 9 at the time, and I shared a room with bunk beds, while our youngest brother, who was 4 or 5, had his own room right next to our parents' bedroom. I remember one day hearing my youngest brother talking to someone in his room, but I could only hear my brother's voice. I opened the door and saw him alone. I asked him who he was talking to, and he said he was talking to Grandpa. Story 47. I created a fuzzy Muppets-like monster costume and enjoyed going on bar crawls while wearing it. I also made a giant baby chicken costume and waved at people dining in restaurants. It brought me immense joy to be a conduit for whimsicality, and I genuinely hope that someone is recounting the story of the giant fluffy chicken that waved at them while they were on a date. Story 48. One of the earliest memories I have is from when I was very young, around 4 or 5 years old, and I had a strange dream. I remember telling my mom that I dreamed we were at a toy store in the mall, and when it was time to pay for the toy I had chosen, the cashier wanted my mom to pay using a chip that was supposed to be in her hand. If anyone here grew up in an evangelical household, you can probably imagine the fear my mom felt when she heard that dream. The strange part is that I was far too young to have ever heard about the mark of the beast or anything like that. Story 49. A few years ago, I was sitting alone at about 9 p.m. in the dining room with only one light on. While sitting back down after getting some water, I saw a humanoid-shaped shadow in the corner of my eye, and it moved out of sight. Story 50. When I was in high school, one day I stayed home sick. At one point, I went to the bathroom, finished up, and washed my hands. Once I opened the door to walk out, I heard footsteps in front of me. They walked down the hallway into the kitchen. I was home alone. Story 51. I had a dream where the silhouette of a lady told me to look left. I woke up and looked left, and at that exact moment, an empty box flew off my table onto the floor. It was several inches away from the edge, so it couldn't have just toppled over on its own. It fell towards the window opposite, which was a closed door, so I doubt it could have been the wind either. Even if it was, that still doesn't explain how I had that dream and woke up at that exact moment to see it tumble. I was never sure what to make of it. It's not like it was anything significant either. Just an empty old box that I didn't need. I could have at least gotten some winning lottery numbers out of it or something. Story 52. The rise of fascism again. A mere 80 to 90 years after the last wave of fascism resulted in the deaths of tens of millions. The same rhetoric, the same speeches, the same hate, and the same fears are being exploited, along with the same gullible individuals who clearly have never read a history book. It is beyond understanding that we have to keep learning this same lesson the hard way. Story 53. I had a dream of someone else's memories. The only reason I know for sure is that I talked to that person, and the look on their face was as if they saw a ghost. One of the things I dreamed about, I was also present for, so I guess it's somewhat explainable. However, the dream was from this person's perspective. After that dream, I understood the exact emotions they were experiencing in those moments. Another thing I dreamt about was from this person's childhood, which I was not present for, and I saw a person I have never met. It was very strange, and I have no idea why I had these dreams. I have had other odd occurrences in my life, but these haunt me not in a scary way, but in a why did this happen kind of way. So far, absolutely nothing has come from having these dreams. Story 54. My mom, who passed away over a decade ago, had a white marble turtle with red jewel eyes that she loved. I still have it. On her birthday, I decided to visit a dog park I had never been to before on a whim. It was completely empty because it was raining. As I entered the area between the inside and outside, I happened to look down and notice something white partially buried. I dug it out. It was a small plastic white turtle with red jewel eyes. I'm not religious or particularly spiritual, but that felt like a sign that she is with me. I kept it, of course. Story 55. Traveling overnight to give a presentation the next morning in a place I had never been before. In the hotel, I wake up baffled by a vivid dream. I am in a large, strange house trying to escape, but the only way to do so is to complete a manual dexterity task. Turn a series of twisted white metal mini blinds on a long row of windows in the same direction and open them halfway. The task was frustrating with my dream hands and felt like it took forever. I fixed the blinds on 20 windows before waking up, wide awake, wondering what that weird dream meant. I get up and dress, then drive to the building where I am teaching the class. The host shows me to the presentation room. 3 sides of the room are lined with windows, and each window has an uneven mini blind that will need to be fixed before the attendees arrive. So incredibly weird. Story 56. During high school, I went to a bush party with a group of close friends and my girlfriend. We all took a shot and had a beer, chatting and enjoying ourselves. It came time to gather more firewood, so several of us went into the woods to collect branches. That's when we discovered a handmade wooden swing attached to a tree about 30 to 40 feet away from our party. After rekindling the fire, I returned to the swing tree and decided to climb it. I sat down on a branch, blinked, and the next thing I knew, the fire was dim and my friends were packing up. My girlfriend was calling my name, and I responded. She asked where I had been, and I gestured toward the tree. She later explained that she ended up doing shots with a different friend because she couldn't find me. She said maybe 3 hours passed. I don't remember any of it. I'm confident that I wasn't drugged, and I wasn't even that drunk. From my perspective, I climbed the tree and lost 3 hours of time. Story 57. In my old house, there was a cat that my entire family remembered petting at night. However, our only cat was always visible from across the room during those moments. Story 58. I have had multiple dreams that have come true. I am not referring to minor things like what I am going to eat for dinner. I am talking about significant events that cannot be explained. Story 59. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, I used to stare at this photo in my school during recess every day. My school had an urban legend about old class photos of alumni, probably from the 1980s. I don't exactly recall the story, but one photo featured a student or ghost with blood all over. I always wanted to look at it to understand what I was seeing. I may have creeped out the staff by staring at a ghost story photo every day. One day, I went to do my usual staring and clearly remember not being able to find the bloody student. I carefully looked at each student in every photo in case I misremembered her location, but she wasn't there anymore. That's when I stopped visiting the area. To this day, I occasionally think about it in an attempt to rationalize my experience. I still have no definite answer but just chalk it up to either my misunderstanding or the usual imagination of children. Story 60. One time while I was deep into a trip, I swear I saw time freeze. Not just in the poetic sense. Birds stopped mid-air, rain paused mid-drop, and sound disappeared completely. Then a little kid on a tricycle rolled up beside me, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're not supposed to be here yet." Before I could say anything, he vanished into thin air like smoke, and time snapped back to normal as if nothing happened. I still don't know if I imagined it or broke the universe for a second. Story 61. When I was a child living at home, my mother always made us vacuum in perfect lines. This was especially true in the second living room that no one used, despite its central location in the house. I personally vacuumed the floors the day we went out for dinner. When we returned, there was a single set of footprints going across the floor in one direction. They were from shoes, which were not allowed in the house, and did not belong to any of us. We checked. No doors or windows appeared to be unlocked or open. That's it, footprints. It's actually not the strangest thing in my life, but those other events are too frightening. Story 62. A community in the upper Midwest is forgiving and tolerating an individual who has killed 2 people and sexually assaulted children. I cannot name him for legal reasons, but he continues to evade charges by manipulating the system, using his schizophrenia as an excuse for his pattern of breaking into homes to assault women. He killed a relative and escaped justice by bribing locals to blame it on organized crime. Midwestern Gothic is not about being crushed by a grain silo collapse. It is about a deranged individual who needs to be confined. Story 63. When I was younger, my family was preparing to leave our house for Christmas with my extended family. Both of my parents went upstairs to get ready. I went upstairs after them but came back down before they did to find multiple gifts under the tree that weren't there before. It was a time when I no longer believed in Santa. My parents couldn't have sneaked down because the staircase was right in front of my bedroom door, and the stairs creaked enough for me to know exactly who was using them. Both of them looked genuinely confused and thought the other had put the gifts under the tree, as they both insisted that it wasn't them. Story 64. I am fairly certain that I almost got murdered on St. Patrick's Day in 2012 or 2013. I lived in Atlanta and was going to a pub in Brookhaven. I needed to get gas around 10 p.m. The gas station was closed, but the lights and pumps were still operational. I pulled up to the pump in my green Honda Accord and noticed a red Tahoe pull into the gas station. However, they just stopped at the entrance. After some time, they drove to the pump in front of mine and backed up, almost touching my car. I was outside pumping gas and just stared at them. They never got out of the car, and after a few minutes, they pulled away without getting gas or anything. All I could think was that they might have tried to block me in to rob me, harm me, or thought I was someone else. I believe nothing happened because I maintained eye contact and didn't take my eyes off them for a second. Additionally, my girlfriend at the time was in the passenger seat while I was outside pumping gas. So if they had tried something, maybe they didn't know how to approach both of us. Story 65. At the end of summer 2011, my friends and I were road tripping around the Shenandoah Valley. After a long day of exploring and traveling, we would pull into a local hotel or motel of varying quality and comfort to grab a night's sleep before setting off again in the morning. Most of these places were fine except for one, the Inn at Afton. The Inn at Afton resembled a forgotten season of American Horror Story. Shadows of a more glamorous heyday were still evident in its decrepit mid-century architecture, the expanse of its empty pool, and the sweeping views of the forested valley below. We checked in early in the afternoon, having decided that it would make a convenient base to explore the nearby area. Our clerk was an obese, balding man of indeterminate age, who wore a filthy tank top and had the demeanor of a lethargic sloth. He was the only other person we saw in the building. The decor of our rooms looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s, and all the toiletries turned out to be taken from other, more respectable hotels, like soap from the Marriott and towels from the Hyatt. We tried not to dwell on the causes of the numerous stains on the walls and furniture. Nearby, one of my friends discovered a tiled room completely empty except for a single drain in the center. Half-jokingly, we called it the murder room. Being young and possessing a much higher tolerance for discomfort than I do now, we didn't think too much about the dilapidated state of our new lodgings before heading off to the nearest town to explore its bar scene. It was on our return that the truly inexplicable incident occurred. The sun had long set, and the isolated location of the inn at Afton meant that its surroundings were particularly dark. Between the hotel and the winding mountain road lay a large parking lot surrounded by long grass that faded into deep forest. As we pulled into this parking lot, one of my friends, whom we'll call C, declared that he absolutely had to go to the bathroom and couldn't possibly wait the extra 3 minutes until we got back to our rooms. Our friend who was driving was accommodating and pulled the car to the edge of the asphalt to let C out. As soon as C got out, our eyes followed the beams of the headlights deep into the long grass, where we saw about 8 figures standing motionless in a circle. Not wanting to find out what these strangers were doing silently in the dark, we quickly ushered C back into the car, sped across the parking lot, and rushed straight to our rooms. Understandably freaked out by what we had just witnessed, and having seen the movie Deliverance a little too soon before our trip to Shenandoah, we barricaded our room by pushing the sofa against the door. Soon afterward, and continuing all night long, we heard the sounds of cars and trucks crisscrossing the parking lot outside at high speed, with engines roaring and handbrakes squealing. After a very fitful night's sleep, we left soon after sunrise, our car the only one now present in front of the hotel. To this day, I have no idea why those people were standing in a circle in the dark in the middle of nowhere, and a large part of me is happy that I don't. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.